Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Stuff Your Accountant Isn't Telling You, the podcast. And today we are live from the city of Athens, Greece, coming to you from our live location as promised. Where are we today, Terrell?
We are at
Alopecia.
Alopecia.
We're at Alopecia and we're at the beach. It's about 35 minutes outside of Athens.
Yes, now for all our European fans, please do not be upset if we mispronounce the name of this beach. But as you can see, it's a beautiful beach.
Phenomenal view.
Amazing view of the beach. But we definitely wanted to make sure that we talked about a few things that we've been observing on this trip. Now, this trip has been, 10 days so far?
Yep.
10 days so far. We go home tomorrow. There's been a mix of seeing sites here in Athens on land, and then we also did a 7-day Virgin cruise where we went through multiple islands: Santorini, Rhodes, Bodrum, Turkey, Mykonos, and then back to Athens. So it's been an amazing trip, and there's been, as you know, there's a lot of analogies, a lot of great business lessons everywhere we went. So
stay tuned.
We want to talk about some of those, so stay tuned for that.
Welcome back, guys. Coming to you from Alopecia, the Alopecia beach. And like we said in the beginning, for our European friends, we apologize if we did not pronounce that correctly. So anyways, coming to you from Alopecia beach, coming to you from Athens, which we know the pronunciation is correct. So Terrell, I want to get your thoughts, first of all, on just overall Athens. What are your opinions so far? What do you think? Are we coming back?
I think that Athens is very underrated as a vacation destination for Americans, or people on the on the far western hemisphere. So Canada, the US, Mexico, South America, we don't really talk about vacationing in Greece as much. And I remember talking to one of our friends over at Live Flow, and I was talking to Lassie. And Lassie and I were talking, and he's European, so he's like, they've been to Greece a lot. And I was like, after being here, I'm like, I see why.
Yeah.
Because, it is a pretty amazing place, especially if you love the beach. Oh my gosh, there are some amazing beaches here. And when you get outside of the downtown of Athens, there's beaches it reminds me a lot of Hawaii, to where when you drive the coast, you'll see a bunch of amazing beaches that you can stop, get out, have fun. And I remember seeing the same thing driving the coast of Brazil, driving up to Rio and driving the coast. Ton of amazing beaches you can stop, get out, and enjoy. So, vacation-wise, it's been amazing.
Yeah, and I think, the thing I really like about Athens as well is just the little pockets of places that we stopped at, where you don't really have to go to this big beach. I feel like in the US sometimes we have a lot of bigger beaches. You kind of have to go to specific locations to really enjoy and savor the beach. But here, it's really just little pockets. Like you mentioned, we're driving. I don't know, how many beaches do you think we saw, or little areas, maybe 10 plus within a 45-minute drive. And there's just little places where you can just stop. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. People just pulled up with their family, put a bunch of beach chairs, are in the water having a great time. So I would agree. I do think Athens is underrated for people on, United States, Canada area. So definitely somewhere we would recommend visiting. But all in all, I just want to jump in and maybe kind of talk about, we did different things, right? We went through the traditional coming into Athens route, and then we took maybe a more unconventional way of touring Greece, which is we did it by cruise. Very beautiful. So we did the Virgin Voyage cruise, very unique. It was a phenomenal experience. And I guess just overall wanted to get your thoughts on when we think about the business aspect of, maybe let's talk about just Athens overall first, business lessons from there. And then I want to talk about really the Virgin Voyage, because that was definitely, I will say, more than I expected. It exceeded my expectations, and I want to spend more time talking about that, just some of the experiences that you took away, and some of the things that you learned
I feel
from
like
that.
we should separate those in like 2 different episodes. Like
Okay, so
one
let's.
on the Virgin Voyage, one on just Athens,
Okay,
and
so
then
let's.
probably another one on some of the actual islands we stopped
Okay,
at.
so then since this episode is from Greece, I would say let's focus on Athens.
I will say, today we got up, we went out, we toured a lot of the city of Athens. We're still on the semi-tour. This is the beach swimming stop of our tour that we're on. Amazing tour guide.
Shout out to Giorgio.
Yeah, Giorgio, Barta, amazing tour guide. We'll definitely have to put his contact information in the comments.
Mm-hmm.
If you come to Athens, definitely he will show you a great time.
Yes.
But one of the things, we started off with going to, some of the major landmarks. So you have the Acropolis. And what I do like about Georgie, he actually explained what Acropolis meant, because I was thinking to myself, like, why is the Acropolis so special when every island you go to in Greece, they have an Acropolis? So
I didn't know that. I just learned something new.
People would say, yeah, the Acropolis in Athens, or the Acropolis in Santorini, or the Acropolis in Mykonos. I'm just like, everybody has one, why is it so special?
Mm-hmm.
And so he explained what it meant, and he broke down the word Acropolis and just explained where it's pretty much it's like the castle of the city is pretty much what it ends up being.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we went, I had a lot more context about what I was going to see. And I will say, first business lesson that jumped out to me is when I think about that in like how we run our business, a lot of times we use these terms in how we describe our business, how we describe what we do, and accountants are very, very, very guilty of this, where they use these terms to describe something and they don't really take time to really help people understand what that means.
Yeah.
So you may be doing a ton of work in the background, but the customer has no context on how valuable this is because you haven't given them any context about it. So, Giorgio started off by explaining what the Acropolis is. I'm like, okay, all right, it's the castle of the city. That's why all these cities have so many. And that's why it's so special, because this one sits on the top of the hill, and most of them do sit on the top of the hill because from that point, you can see when, let's say enemies are coming in to attack your city. It is a high vantage point. You can see all around, and it gives you really good view, and it gives you a great time to be able to sound the alarms, to respond and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I thought the Acropolis seeing it was amazing. Now I'm curious on your perspective on getting into the Acropolis. So what was your opinion on that?
I think the getting in experience was, okay, let me say it like this. When we got there, because I'm working on looking at the glass half empty, half full, okay? Not half empty, half full. So I will say, when we arrived, it was a very long process. However, once we did go into the Acropolis, I feel like it was worth it. It was a beautiful view, and you really get to be part of history. So that was nice. But the process to get there was very, very complicated. And to be honest with you, if it wasn't for Terrell, I probably would have been like, you know what? I'm not trying to do this. I'm done. We could just go. I could say I was here. It's not that serious. But I think for me, even the business correlation in that is that oftentimes when there isn't a good process in place and how to kind of bring people in on how things work and the process, people can lose interest very quickly. Because I think for me, the issue was the fact that there really wasn't any clarity. There were no signs. There were no signs on whether we were headed in the right direction. There were no signs on where the line started. We didn't know if this was the ticket line. We didn't know if this was the line to freaking get into where we were going. It was just really confusing. And that was an area where we quickly said, like, man, they have no sort of direction here. And if it was somebody who had not yet bought a ticket, I think a lot of people would have probably gotten so frustrated that they would have just been like, all right, I'm done. Like, I don't really need to be here, especially because it was so hot. And I think for me, the business correlation in that is just as a business owner and something your accountant, I think is probably applies to any business owner, accountants, and even the businesses that are, hiring accountants. It's just how easy are you making it for your customers to follow and understand the process of how to do business with you? Because a lot of people are not going to be in a similar position where they've spent thousands of dollars to come to your location. And now they're like, all right, I'm here. I might as well put up with the discomfort and the lack of directions and just manage through it. A lot of times, if people feel like they have another option, they're less likely to put up with the discomfort of bad processes. And I think for me, that was such a big lesson, is just like, not everybody's an Acropolis. So not every business is an Acropolis. So it's like, if people aren't willing to, if you're not important, or if you're not a type of business where people are like, I'm willing to put up with the inconvenience, then more than likely you're going to lose business because you don't have clear processes.
Yeah. I mean, and I think to give it a little bit more context, I feel like you were a little generous on this. Like, this is like, Greece is experiencing a heat wave right now.
Yes.
So there's a heat wave going on. There's some days it's been, 100+ degrees.
That is correct.
So there's a heat wave going on. The Acropolis literally sits on the top of a very, very high hill, or a mountain peak for many people who are looking at it, to where there isn't really much shade at all. I mean, you are completely exposed to the sun. It is hot. Plus, as you have to walk up this hill. So you walk up this hill about maybe 50, 60 yards
it's
up
a walk.
hill.
Yeah.
And when you get there,
there's no shade, by the way.
There was like maybe, there's probably 400 people in line to buy a ticket. Now, the great thing about our tour guide is he gave us a very good secret.
Yes.
Which I'll share that one in a second. Secret he gave us. So you got 400 people in line to get a ticket. After you get a ticket, then there's another line, and there's probably like another, 500 people there waiting to get in. Now, there are supposed to be one line for, I guess you would say, one line for groups of 10 or more. The sign was very, very small for that.
Very small.
Like, you had to walk all the way up to the gate to see that, okay, that's what that line
I was standing in that line for a little bit.
And then there's another line that was just for people who are less than groups of 10. Now, it's supposed to be one line, but the line went down and then split off like this, to where it's like no one really knew where the line started or where the line began. And so as the lines start merging together, then you get to this little gate wraparound where you got to walk through and stuff like that. And
I almost fought two ladies.
And I think, there were some ladies that were trying to cut through the line, and they were saying like, oh, we bought a skip the line ticket. And people were explaining like, we all bought a skip the line ticket.
The skip the line ticket was to skip the line to not have to wait in line to buy the tickets. It wasn't to skip the line to not have to stand in line.
To get in.
Yeah.
So, we go through that part, and I would say right about the time when you get to like the little gate that you got to walk through, that's where I started seeing, staff members giving people instructions on what to do. And I do think like, it's a lot of people, because like I said, you got 400 people waiting to buy a ticket. You got about 500 people in line.
Waiting in line, yeah.
And you got about, 500 people coming out. And then you got about another 1,500 people that are already in, already seeing the sites. So, I mean, you got a few thousand people. I mean, you got almost 4,000 people there that are trying to see this site. Now, it's a very big site. I think it's very beautiful. But I think to your point, and in all transparency, this is something we've had to work on as well, because one of the things that I've looked at is in some ways we lost a potential customer because our sales process wasn't clear. Like, people didn't know what the next step was, or let's say I had a discovery call with them. We found out what they liked or what they needed. We told them what the offering was, but then we didn't follow up as clearly about what the next step was. So when we finally got around to following up again, they were no longer interested in buying our service, to where I looked at it and said, hey, we got to do some work on this. We have to make it clearer so people understand how to do business with us. They understand what the next steps are. And then even after they pay for the service, they need to understand, like, what are the next steps? Like, what are the incremental milestones? Like, hey, when should you see your first draft of your reporting? What will be the frequency that happens afterwards? And that's something that we had to figure out how to get better at. And I think every business can benefit from that, is helping people understand, here's how you buy from us. After you buy it from us, here's what the process is going to look like moving forward. That way people can deal with whether it's a wait period or whether it's the frustration of a crowd or whatever. People know what to expect when they're going through that.
That's a really good point, because even if I think back, going back to the structure of how they set up, they put most of their staff was inside, which makes sense from a quantity standpoint, because you have 1,500 people inside. You probably need more people to navigate and answer questions. But honestly, from a emotional management standpoint, you probably need some sort of person at the very beginning that kind of, like you said, explains, hey, this is how it's going to work. It's going to be a long line, but hey, once you get up there, it's going to be worth it, or this is what you can expect. And I think if there was that person at the beginning, it would have made the process a lot more bearable going through it. And I think, to your point, having people staffed strategically through the process, I think, is important. And sometimes as business owners, it is hard to figure out where that process and where that point should be. But I think, like you said, how we had to learn from our experiences, I think helped us be able to kind of develop that. And something that you have to kind of adapt, because it's not the same, across the board.
Yeah, I mean, and this is something that I think is very great, because we work with a lot of law firms. So here's a very specific example. Something that I think is great for law firms is when a law firm signs up to hire a bookkeeper, a lot of times things are in a mess. There's a lot of cleanup that needs to happen. What you should probably expect, and this is something that we're starting to do, is to give people a timeline on, all right, here's what we're going to do in month one. Month one, we're going to be working through the details. We're going to clean up a lot of the old stuff, the historical stuff. Month two is where we'll get all the current stuff completed so you can start to see a regular draft of your financials. Then by month three, that's where we start diving in a bit more on cleaning up the trust accounting, so you can get better visibility on the trust accounting, because you really can't get a good trust accounting reconciliation if the historical stuff is still a mess.
Right.
So we got to clean those two things up first. And then by month number 4 is where we can really start to look at creating like dashboards and KPIs, things that are going to help you manage your business and things that are going to help you make decisions. And I think by giving them a 4-month roadmap like that, and then also delivering on those things, it helps them have a bit more confidence in,
that's a good point,
what's going on.
That's
now,
a good point.
Of course, if it's a bigger mess than normal, okay, that timeline gets extended a little bit more if there's a whole lot more cleanup to be done and stuff like that. But that's a general good idea of how to think about, hey, the first 4 months when starting with a new bookkeeper if you're a law firm.
Yeah, that's really good. And I think one of the things that I would encourage accountants, and I really just encourage as a business owner, is getting that level of clarity when you start working with a bookkeeper as to what the expectations are in terms of timing. Because I have a friend, she's a business owner, and she was communicating to me her frustration in working with an accountant. And she had told me that this is somebody who, when she first started, had given her like a very vague, it was a very general timeline. It's like, hey, there was a delay in the timeline or whatever, and they just give a very vague date. So there wasn't it wasn't a very good definition. I think part of that was just because the accountant didn't really take time in the beginning to kind of understand like the magnitude or some of the complexities within her industry. And so I think once they understood that, they didn't come back to actually communicate and say, okay, based on this is how long it's going to take. And she was very frustrated. And she shared with me, I was like, okay, what are some of the things that this person is doing for you? And when she gave me the information, I'm like, all right, they kind of sold you. They were very confident with the amount of time it was going to take, because from my experience, it's going to take you at least 4 months for this to be done. But I think it's just for the accountants not being afraid to communicate the reality of, based on your assessment of how long it's really going to take to clean it up. Because I think sometimes some accountants are nervous, like, okay, they're going to lose the business if they truly communicate how long it takes. But really, you want to be honest, because if you don't want to end up in a situation where you basically leave a bad taste in the client's mouth because you've taken their money and you're working on it because you're nervous that, they're going to be upset if it's longer than you committed. It's just like, just be upfront, And also, like, because sometimes there are situations where you didn't know it was going to take that long. Like, for example, in my friend's case. And so in that situation, the best thing to have done was to turn around and say, you know what, based on what we're seeing, it's probably going to take a little bit longer than we expected. And, you know, being over communicating in a sense, or communicating about where we are in the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that as your business grows, because that's something that we're navigating too, and, you know, having those conversations with our team members, letting them know, hey, here's the timeline we need to work on with this client. And yes, the team is working on, let's say, 20 other clients, but just being able to set out clear timelines. And for us, one of the big things we've been looking at is a practice management software, because we were like, hey, we really need to have a tool in place to really help the team manage that process, because that's impacting, our customers' satisfaction. Mm-hmm. Like, if we're not able to communicate a clear timeline on how things are going to happen and when they can expect it, then our customers are going to be wondering, like, well, what am I paying all this money for?
Yeah.
And then if our team doesn't know what those deadlines are, they may be working on the right things at the wrong time. Mm-hmm. And so I think as you grow, you do want to look at some things to really explore, like, okay, all right, what are some tools we can have in place that will help us? And I'll probably do a whole nother video where I go a little bit more, I talk about, kind of what that journey's been like for us as we've looked at different practice management software.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really good. That's a really good point. Anything else you want to point out about Athens and just the correlations on the business side?
Yeah, I mean, there are so many different things. I will say, to this customer experience piece of it, is our tour guide, what he told us was, I think, a great idea. He said, you can go straight to, I can take you to the Acropolis.
Oh, yeah.
You can buy the ticket there, and it's going to take X amount of time. Like, you got to wait in that long line. He was like, or what you could do is I could take you to the Temple of Zeus, which there's not that many people there, and you can buy the full day pass for €30. And what that will do is it'll give you access to the Temple of Zeus. You'll get access to the Acropolis. You'll also get access to the Agora, and you don't have to wait in line at any of them.
Yeah, that 400 people line.
You get right into the skip the line process for all three of those locations with this one ticket. So we started off at the Temple of Zeus, where we literally walked up to the gate, we paid, we walked in because there was really no one in line. Mm-hmm. And then when we got to, the Acropolis, I was like, oh, that's why he took us there first, because we could skip that line over there, because it looked like it was about an hour wait to go through the line just to buy the ticket. Mm-hmm. And then it was going to be another hour to wait in line to get inside.
Yep.
And then it's another 30 minutes to walk up the steps to get into the Acropolis.
Unnecessary.
After you scan your ticket, to where there's going to be a lot of waiting. So I think, finding ways, even in your own business, of, like, let's say if I explain to someone and say, hey, it's going to take about 4 months for us to get to that point where we're doing these regular KPIs, you're getting this regular reporting. And if they say, hey, that's too long, well, hey, here's an option of what we can do to make it faster.
Yeah.
Hey, here's a service offering where, hey, we're going to do a special cleanup project because we're going to prioritize it. Now, you're going to pay a little bit more because we are speeding up. We're doing in 1 month what it was going to take us 2.5 or 3 months. So there are different options you can offer people, because sometimes time is of the essence for some of your clients. So you can always come up with a different and expedited version of your service, or an expedited version, whether it's your delivery or whatever product or service you have. Mm-hmm. Come up with an expedited version, and you can have a normal timeline. That way, if the normal timeline is too long, people can pay a premium to get an expedited version.
No, that's really good. That's a really good idea. I think just overall, the customer experience, I think, has been very pleasant for me. I think people just really going out of their way to give you the best experience, even in situations where it doesn't necessarily yield a profit for them. One of the things that I will say that I like and I compliment you about this, Terrell, all the time, is I think for clients that may have decided like, hey, you know what, we don't think that you're the best fit for us, especially like as we were transitioning maybe to law firms in the business. But I think in those situations, like really just doing the right thing of saying, hey, customer service and customer experience, phenomenal customer experience until the very end, even on the handover. And I've just heard horror stories about, accountants basically screwing over the businesses that they support because they've decided to leave them. And that's one of the things that we've always said is like, we'll do business with you. And if you decide that we're not the right fit for you, we want you to get the business and the accountant, right? We want you to work with the right accountant that you feel like best supports your business and will help you transition then. And that's one thing that I admire about you. I think it's just leading the company in that way to where it's like, hey, we're not gonna, if somebody says they are no longer interested, or they may, maybe they feel like their business isn't big enough for us to support them, supporting the transition and wishing them the best in their business, because ultimately at the end of the day, if we say that we're doing what's in the best interest of the business owner, it has to be up until the point of them, even if they decide that they don't want to do business with us any longer. So
yeah, I mean, because one of the things that I think about is, a lot of people look at doing business with someone is, that money is exchanging hands, meaning like, hey, they're giving us money. The way I look at it is, I'm doing business as long as the company's reputation is involved in any type of transaction, whether it's a discovery call, because not everybody pays for an upfront discovery call, that we have some free discovery calls. To me, that's part of doing business. Mm-hmm. Like, the content that we put out, like, to me, that's part of doing business, because what I want that experience to be is, I want it to give people a glimpse of what the experience is like when they actually do hand us money.
Yeah.
Because I think if you think about it at a bigger scale like that, I think what it does, it allows you to really, really understand that, hey, your reputation is on the line, whether they're handing you money or not.
That's
because there have been some people who have chosen to they've chosen to pay another accounting firm for their service because we weren't the right fit. But the way that we handled the conversation led them to tell other people to come do business with us, which has led to like more referrals and stuff like that. And so I always think about, doing business isn't just, hey, I'm going to treat you well because you're giving me money. It's like, I'm going to treat you well because our reputation is on the line right now.
Right. That's a really good point. That's a really good point. Any final thoughts? Because, I do want to go in and enjoy this water in the background. So what else do you want to add, Fred?
Final thought I would say is, I think is really think about the customer experience. And what I would tell people is, as you're taking a vacation, as you're going on a trip or wherever you're going, is to really just think about that. Like, what is your experience like when you're going through, that vacation, or whether you're going through buying something or you're going through purchasing, like, what is your experience like? And then often ask yourself, like, if this were my business and someone was going through my business, how would they describe the experience that I'm giving them?
Yeah.
And then also, because like I said, we are accountants. So one of the things that I always ask people is, think about the experience that you're having with your accountant. If you're not happy with your experience that you're having with your accountant, and I will say, if you're a law firm, we are the perfect fit for you, is to reach out, give us a call, or just even like sit down and have a conversation with your accountant, because it doesn't have to be a contentious one. You can just lay out like, hey, here are some of the things that I was expecting, from my accountant, and here's some of the things that you have done. I'm not saying that I'm trying to get rid of you, but how can we close the gap on what I expect and what I'm being given? Because I think you will enhance the value you're getting from that relationship if you're willing to have that conversation. But it starts with you actually taking a look at what has the service been like that you've been getting, and then just having an open conversation about it.
Absolutely.
All right.
Great way to wrap up.
Until next time.